we are now at the halfway point, guys. Before we move on to the fourth album, anything you want to weigh in or just plow forward?
I'm ready. Keep going.
All right, plow forward, which means we're going to do album number 4, which Matt will read the numbers for, and then Josh will go into a take.
Okay, so this is the Buzzcocks Singles Going Steady. It's actually a compilation album. Comes in at number 219 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums, number 17 in 1979, number 983 of all time, and it is the Buzzcocks' highest-rated album on Best Ever Albums. And again, not in Rolling Stone.
There we go. All right, Josh.
Yeah, so this is, I'm familiar with the Buzzcocks, and I heard some of these songs before. Ever Fall in Love is probably their biggest hit, but they're kind of one of those foundational punk rock bands in Britain, I would say, along with Sex Pistols and The Clash. And I don't know if they're around at the same time, so they remind me of later punk bands as well. They are kind of like on the other side of the hill from the Undertones. I feel like the Buzzcocks write catchier album songs that I responded to more. They're a bit more melodic. The lead singer's voice, while a little whiny at times, I responded to more. And they're also kind of, even though they're punk rock, they're kind of less confrontational, I would say. They seem to, I think they are kind of one of those foundational pop punk bands, if we're going to try and define that as a genre. And they have really good guitar work in here. They're fun to sing along to and dance to. Something like the track Autonomy would be an example of that. I think that might be one of my favorite songs on here. There's some excellent bass lines in this. Why Can't I Touch It? It's a funny song. And they bring that sense of humor that a lot of the punk bands bring to their work as well in their lyrics. So, their first songs on this is called Orgasmatic, so that kind of sets the tone right away, and it's pretty funny. And what else? Yeah, this is a good listen. This was one that I enjoyed. I did feel it was a little long, but since it's a compilation album, and it's a compilation album because this is what was released in America, right, John?
It's basically they took their singles together and bundled it, but it was sold and is considered an album as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So yeah, I feel like you get a good sense of who they are as a result. I can see why some of these songs were singles for sure, and I think it's definitely worth listening to. Thumbs up from me.
All right. I think I'm second, right, on this one. Mm-hmm. And I know this album extraordinarily well. The first of two albums I've, probably listened to over 50 times in my life in totality. I think the Buzzcocks are an incredible pop band. I really do. I think they write great songs. I think they write very funny songs, but they write funny songs that also ring true. So while you're laughing, you also kind of have to admit to yourself that what they're writing about can be true at different times. Now, Josh mentioned Orgasm Addict, right? And it's important to describe that is in the classic tradition of Longview by Green Day, right? Which is basically Green Day wrote that song later. You know what I mean? They did bits and pieces of it, but it's it's something about as benign as masturbation, but it's it also has a little bit of a deeper context under it. There's that the Buzzcocks always have a feel to me kind of disaffectedness, but good-natured disaffectedness. In that way, I would say that maybe not totally sonically. Green Day, obviously I said before, is influenced, but I think they're cousin bands to the Replacements in the 80s. They write about suburban ennui to some degree. The Buzzcocks maybe not as much suburban because they're English. It could be a feel. They're also I've always thought that the Buzzcocks remind me a little bit of the Kinks as well in terms of how they put songs together. Now they put theirs together in what I guess you'd recognize as a package that's more punk, right, or part of a scene, but much like we talked Madness last week in Two Tone and how they were a different version of Two Tone, they were kind of more of a an English pop group that just happened to be classified with these other groups that had a different sound altogether. I felt the same way about the Buzzcocks and the punk sound a little bit. They have it, but they also just as much feel like the Kinks to me as they feel like a punk band. When I listen to like the Clash, for example, or the Sex Pistols, I don't go, oh, well, they're the Kinks, basically, but just they come from a different tradition, almost more 50s rock, like we said before, or 60s rock, rock of that, pop song rock. But yeah, this album is littered with good songs, like all over it. And so this is it was hard for me to rank this album because I've listened to it so much. I'm like, okay, if I'm listening to this outside of personal taste, like where does it fall as an album in the 70s, right? Like in terms of as an artistic ranking, and it still would be high. I think what I said about the undertones holds up to this as well. It's very hard to write a good pop song, never mind like 12 or 14 on one collection, and it's just like they're banging out one great song after another on this. So I love this album, and very, very strong recommendation. I can expand on it more, but I want to give some floor to Matt as well.
Yeah, I really like this too. This one, I knew a couple of the songs on it, and as soon as, but I probably didn't know them by name, but as soon as the fifth track, Ever Fallen in Love with Someone You Shouldn't Have, as soon as that came on, I was like, oh yes, like that's a great, that song, that's kind of building off a little bit of what I was talking about with the undertones. There's such complexity in that for like a pop song. There's a couple of different parts going on. It's not like, when I say complexity, I'm not saying that it's, that it's doing anything like this earth-shattering, groundbreaking kind of thing. But I just love the way that they incorporate like 3 or 4 different parts that
I agree. Yep, Matt. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just it's there's a really cool part in the verse, and then there's like 2 parts in the chorus that they kind of take in a little bit of a different direction. The harmonies are great. I love the flow of the lyrics because he's saying there's a lot of words that are happening in a very short period of time, and it seems like it could be too much, but it's not. It fits in totally well. It's very smooth, and that is an excellent, excellent, excellent song. And I agree. I think that this. I'm initially thinking this is a punk band, but there are a ton of pop elements in here that are just really good, catchy songs. There's a stroke there, man. What is it? Everybody's Happy Nowadays. That's a Stroke song. That's a song that's like
yes,
that. Like that sounds exactly like Fat. The drum part there, the bass part, everything is like the Strokes just totally ripping off the Buzzcocks right there. Is what's happening. I really liked the other single that was a highly listened song on this record is Why Can't I Touch It. That bass line is just it's such a unique song on this because it might be the least punk sounding song on this. It's more of a laid back, slower it's like its own unique thing, and it goes on long too. It's like probably the longest song on here, probably a little bit too long. I don't know if it needs to do it that much, but it does. It's a really catchy song, and I agree with you, Josh. I think that Autonomy might be my favorite song on here that I never heard of before. There's just a really cool, urgent guitar sound on that, and again another song that's got two excellent distinctive verse parts and chorus parts. And I don't know if I've talked about that on this before. I'm just thinking about it now, but because sometimes with songs, it's like that I really like. It's like I really like the verse is really what gets me, or the chorus is really what gets me. And the best is when they get you equally, And there's a couple of songs on here that are kind of like that, and that to me is some of the best music or the music that I can get down to the most. So probably my only real complaint here is the length. But there's something to be said about that because on Spotify it comes in at 1 hour and 15 minutes. But if you look at like the original track listing on Wikipedia, it looks like there was a re-release in 2001 that added on 4, 5, 8 songs. So I'm wondering if I would have liked this better if it would have just been what the original release was, which would have been a total of 16 songs. Cut back. I don't know.
And that's what I listened to. I listened to the 16-song album.
Oh, you did? Okay. So I listened, and it's interesting because on Spotify you listen. It's all of them, and on Apple you can listen to just parts of them. So the times that I listened to it the whole way through, I did find myself like the longer version. I did find myself being a little bit like, okay, like again, 1 hour and 15 minutes is that's like a double album, like, and then some. So I would probably rather listen to this in its original format, but that's not a huge deal. I really like this. I'm glad I got to experience a little bit more of their stuff.
So I see on the re-release they had Running Free, which is a song I love, and then You Say You Don't Love Me, which is a great song. It's one of my favorite Buzzcocks songs, and I didn't even put two. I know that from an album called A Different Kind of Tension, another album I've listened to 1,000 times.
Yep.
And multiple 90s bands covered it. I know Goldfinger is the one that comes to mind for me before they covered that. But I love that song. And one thing that's unique about the Buzzcocks that I've always loved about them is they have this almost a calling card where they write a chorus and then they do a guitar part after the chorus that's sort of like a dangling guitar part after it that comes up all the time. Like, I think of like, if the most famous song, Ever Fallen in Love, it's like that, like, dun 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 dun, like, and they kind of build it afterwards, and they do it in like Autonomy, dun dun dun, and like that time like comes in, and as you mentioned, Matt, their chord progressions, while not like virtuoso, are recognizable as complex pop chord progressions.
Right.
And I mean, that's why they're Beatles.
More than they need.
Beatles. It's
and they kind of do more than they need to, but you're glad that they're doing that. It's not like overdoing it. It's actually
it's not masturbatory.
Yeah, it's providing more of a layer to it that takes you to the next level.
Yeah, and I want to stress as well, and I find that they write really relatable love songs, which is something, we talked before about the Kinks don't write as many love songs, but they wrote songs you could really relate to. And Elvis Costello comes to mind, another guy who writes, to me, really relatable love songs that you can, me personally, I can put myself in as the protagonist of their love songs more than I can, like, a certain type of other love song that's like, who can I pick on? Like, who writes the type of love song? Billy Joel. There we go. There's a good example right there of like
the punching bag returns.
Well, I don't mean to. Yeah, I had like lots of people. I don't. Let me not pick him. Then let me pick Stevie Wonder. There we go. There's where it's kind of like, I feel love. Love.
I love love.
Or like a nostalgic idea, like or we talked Bruce Springsteen. I don't want to pick on my same normal ones. Let's even go to like. That or like a super hypersexualized version as well. Boston was another group that wrote like love songs that in no way I could connect to, like, and these though are songs where they seem complex enough that they're individual narratives, but also you can throw yourself in it and they're not trite. So,
and one of these guys went on to do to form Magazine. Is that correct?
I don't know if he went on to form Magazine.
I thought that one of the guys from this was. Oh, I have to look this up. That's how you talked about it, because you were like, oh, I thought that this guy sounded like.
You might be right.
They were a Magazine.
Or did somebody from Magazine go to the Buzzcocks? Is that what? I think it might have been the other way, right?
All right, now I'm going to have to look this up.
You threw me. No, hold it. Here, here we go. You're right, Matt. After a few months, Devoto left the group, expressing his dissatisfaction, and he returned to college for a year, then formed Magazine. So, yeah.
Devoto. Okay, he's not on this. He's not listed. Who's Devoto?
Well, I think he was before they broke.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I think I'm not thinking of it, because his name was, let me find him right there. He was part of the original, Howard Devoto.
Got it.
Was part of the original group, and he left the group. It's before September 77, because this is referencing that, and they already have the new band. And then this one came out in America in 79, but most of these songs were released in Britain
so he
in
looks like he was there
78.
for like maybe a year or two. Yeah, and he left. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go.
So there you
Do
go.
you know
I like both of them.
Was this a band that crossed over into American popularity at all? Do you know? It seems like they're kind of British.
Not really, but they were like a popular support band for all the bands in the 90s. Like they opened Nirvana's last tour at Kurt Cobain's request. They've opened for Pearl Jam. They've opened for like all kinds. Like there's a lot of people who love the Buzzcocks. Gotcha. I kind of stumbled into the Buzzcocks just because there was a period where it felt like every band that I listened to, like they'd say, who are some of your favorite bands? And the Buzzcocks would come up like constantly in that. And so it's like, well, I got to check this band out. And sure enough, yeah.
They're still
I get
around. They're still around, but there's only one original member who's Steve Diggle.
Then
And
you're not really still around at that, are you? Yeah.
Well, they tour under the name Buzzcocks, but no, you're right. I mean, there's 3 other people in the band. The one started in 2006, one in 2008, and one in 2019. So, yeah.
Well, in 30 years, if I'm doing this podcast, but neither of you guys are around, and
it's not CTS, John.
Yeah, CTS. Is it really CTS?
That's what all our fans would be like. It's not the same without Matt and Josh.
That guy's dead.
Yeah, I can make it like a 5-person group. I can just do whatever the hell I want and just take the name. So yeah, exactly. So. All right. But yeah, this one's a very strong thumbs up. I'm actually going to be curious. There's a couple this week. I have to figure out like where I would put them, like from an artistic rating as opposed to the John scale of how much do I like this shit rating. And so, yeah, if it was that rating, it's remarkably high.
Yeah.
In terms of putting it though, like as from a critical lens, I'm not quite sure yet, but it will be high for sure.